We're rolling. For those who didn't see that, we're all looking at the sun coming through, and now the curtains have been shut after waiting for months of darkness. It comes in and blinds virtually everybody in the council chamber. But anyway, welcome to the Cabinet meeting today. We've got 11 items, I think, on the agenda, so we're better start. The first one being apologies for absence. And as I can see before me, there are no apologies. Thank you. We're then asked to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on 13th December 2021. That's on page 5 to 7. I'll move those. Seconded. Seconded. Thank you. We agreed. You are agreed, so that's those out of the way. Thank you. Declarations of interest in the remainder of the items. Any to declare? No. None declared. Thank you. So we'll move on to Chief Executive at item 4, which you can find on page 9 to 14. He's got a star in roll today. He's got 3 items there, so you can start. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. This is just the 4-month forward plan for the council. Just one thing to note, it does say the budget reports are going to the 10th of February Cabinet. In actual fact, it is the 17th of February. We've changed the date, so just that one amendment, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Agree that. So we'll move on to item 5, which is Gedling plan, and that is on page 15 to 41. It's Q3 performance report. Mike.
Thank you, Leader. I'll take my mask off for a minute. So this report sets out the performance data for the council at the end of Q3, which takes us up to the end of December 2021. So starting with actions, there are 96 actions currently active in the multi-year Gedling plan, which ends in March 2023. So far this year, we have completed 4 actions out of the 27 expected, and the other 23 are progressing well. No problems with delivery are anticipated at this stage. In terms of performance indicators, there are 31 indicators, 11 of which are on target, 3 are slightly below target, and 8 have unfortunately missed the target. The other 9 indicators are for tracking purposes only. The reasons for the 8 indicators that have missed the target are set out in the report at paragraph 2.5, but predominantly in nearly all of the cases, the underlying reason is the impact of COVID on our services. However, I'm pleased to report, and it is detailed in that paragraph 2.5 as well, that nearly all of these are now starting to recover, and the figures for Q4 should then reflect an improved position for the year end. In terms of achievements this quarter, these are set out in detail in the appendix to this report, but some of the highlights of positive performance are also summarised and brought out in paragraph 2.7. These do cover first of all, the approval of the new Equality and Diversity Policy, very important document for this council, and we're really pleased to see that has come through and been approved. The completion of the residents and staff surveys to enable us to make improvements to our services. The launch of the Rediscover Campaign over the Christmas period, and this was to try and get more people to shop in our local town centres. Again, a very positive exercise and piece of promotion. The Council's continued investment in carbon reduction measures, and hereby it's reported that we have launched the Green Reward Scheme in this quarter. The really good news about the record numbers of participants in swimming lessons. Now the leisure centres have reopened, we're actually surpassing the number of lessons that we did pre-COVID, which is really fantastic news. And finally, the retention of our 4 green flag status for our amazing parks. So, just to end, Leader, can I place on record my thanks to all the staff involved in achieving these targets and ongoing as well, but I'm happy to answer any questions, Leader. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions, Jenny?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just want to pass on my thanks and endorse what the Chief Exec said to staff for maintaining the high standards in very difficult circumstances. I particularly want to thank the Empty Homes Officer, who's actually doubled the number in the target. She's done an absolutely splendid job, and I know recently she's sent out to ward members details of empty homes that have been brought back into their properties that have been brought back into use in their areas, which I think is incredibly useful. And I think the Chief Exec said this has contributed to us getting some of the new homes bonus as well. So it's a win-win all round. Also planning team who've, again, on the major planning applications have exceeded their target again. I know minor planning has gone down a little bit, but I know that will come back up. Just to say thank you to Robin Com's team and the ERG group for the Rediscover campaign. I know that people who took part in that, some of the retailers were really pleased to get some publicity, and I think that went down very well. Just on the Green Rewards launch, I'm not sure how much people understand about that, and I just wonder if it's worthwhile doing a bit more publicity on that, because it got quite a good launch and some publicity, but it seems to have gone quiet, and I'm assuming it's still running, so perhaps we can do a little bit more to encourage people to take part in that scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to start by echoing the Chief Executive's comments about how, despite COVID, I think this is a really substantial record of achievement. I think the staff could be proud of that. I'd just like to draw one out. It's probably in the light of last night's discussion. On page 38 of the pack, the Green Homes Retrofit, where as a council working with the Midland Energy Partnership and people like Jigsaw, we've been able to help insulate and help with the power to to various properties. The emphasis has been on Netherfield because it's the nature of the housing stock. But I think it's a real practical attempt to help address fuel poverty. It's got both environmental benefits, as drawn out in the report, but also health benefits for the people who otherwise would be in cold, wet and damp homes. So I think it's a good scheme that we ought to be proud of. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And on discussions yesterday with the new climate change officer and Sam, he was saying that we're going to spread that across the borough, not just in Netherfield. And we will be applying for more and more grants, hopefully, when they become available. Thank you, Viv.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just again to echo Mike in terms of the achievements. I think the achievements have been very difficult, and I think it's brilliant the things that we have achieved. I'd like to also thank Alison Ball and the team around all the hard work to launch the Equalities and Diversity Policy, which is, it's a start now. I mean, we are well on the way as a council, and we've got more work to do, but we've got a good plan in place. And I'd like to thank all the team in terms of their support around that, and to my policy author, Catherine. But the other thing I thought was brilliant when I was looking at this report was, in fact, the swimming lessons. The fact that in the history of the leisure centres, this is the most in terms of young people taking part in swimming lessons. When we know one of the issues has been during the pandemic about children's mental health, it's about health, obesity, fitness, etc. So the fact that actually we've got more young people swimming is brilliant. So, well done everybody in our leisure centres, and well done to our communities for getting young people active. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Can I just say a word of thanks for our department down at the depot, because I think they've been under tremendous pressure from the general public and people at large, because everybody wants the waste clear. Everybody's been doing the decorating. There's been more waste being collected. And I think they've done extremely well with the conditions they've worked under. I mean, we lost 2 or 3 drivers because the price of lorry drivers went up a bomb, and we lost one of these drivers. But we've done really, really well down there. I don't think there's anybody could really make any complaints about what's happened down there. They've been under pressure like everybody else has. But I think they've worked extremely well and done a good job for the borough. And I think most people seem to think we've done exceptionally well. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Just before I bring Mike in to answer any queries there, Mike, is there anything we can do I'm looking at the energy, and it is an energy crisis. We saw it in the council last night, that families are going to suffer significantly, particularly after April. That I know it's hard to ask of a very small group of people that we've got as officers, but if we can start looking and searching and seeing if there's any grants anywhere that might assist these families, because I don't think people really understand what is about to come along. And I hate using the word tsunami, but it's very much like that, because there is an absolute bang, bang, bang effect, and warmth is one of those things that families should have. It came up last night, what are we, the richest, or one of the richest nations in the world, about the sixth, I think, in the economy, and yet we can't really look out for those people. We heard some very limp excuses when we tried to put forward some suggestions last night, but I want us to search even further and bring a report back to this Cabinet, not next time, but the time after, so it gives you a couple of sessions to see what avenues, where we can go, if there's anything that we can alleviate the problems that are going to come for people, because it's not just about the heating, it's paying for everything. And without rehearsing what we went through last night in the full council, there is a consensus here. I know we've got the majority, but we've got to find a way, because some people, their mental health will be destroyed. The red letters will be dropping through the enveloped things there with with the windows in, and thing they sort of throw down there. There'll be piles of them in some people's houses. One, they're not able to manage, and other things, they're not able to afford it. So we've really got to concentrate. That's a good chunk of our community, unfortunately, will be left behind. Thank you.
Sorry,
Mike wants to.
Sorry, Leader. Yes, I can certainly look through there and see what there is. So new grants are always popping up, and we'll see what comes about. But yes, thank you, Leader.
Michael.
Yeah, just thanks, Leader. Wanted to draw attention to the outstanding work that our customer services team have been doing in recent months. I went to see them a few weeks ago and asked questions about what were the major issues that they were facing in terms of calls from our residents. And notwithstanding the ongoing pressure around taking calls around fly tipping, issues there may be around, tidying up streets, issues that they may get in terms of people flagging antisocial behaviour, and all the other sorts of issues that are raised through the customer services team. Pretty remarkable that in the recent period they have made 451 referrals to the Household Support Grant Referral Scheme. It's a scheme that actually we are not directly responsible for. The County Council, under the way the government has set out, provisions are responsible for, but we as a Borough Council have stepped up. It's our one-stop shop, our customer services team that have been taking those calls, making the referrals, sitting on the phone and actually walking through the applications with the households who have been applying. And those vouchers have then been able to assist people in terms of costs towards their energy bills, costs towards supermarket vouchers and other issues. They're not going to resolve the problem around the stresses and strains that people face in terms of the escalating cost of bills. I think we're clear in the debate last night in Council, Leader, that is going to require urgent government action. The government need to end the dither and delay on this and actually immediately intervene to try and support residents in the borough. But our customer services team deserve huge accolades from us for the work that they've been doing. I also just want to put on record my thanks to Nikki Bryan, and just to use one example of the amazing work she's doing to bring empty homes into use. There's a home in my ward that has been empty for a considerable number of years, that was a real eyesore, that was attracting unwanted behaviour and attention from people in the locality, was bringing down the area. And Nikki's persisted, and it's been difficult. It's been a struggle. She's worked with me, and she's worked with the other local councillors, Councillor Fox, and also Councillor Pauline Allen as the county councillor, and she has not given in. And it was really pleasing to receive an email yesterday to say that she's finally managed to bring that property into good use. And I have to say the property looks really nice now, the renovation work that's been done, and has really brought up the surrounding area. And the final point I just want to make is this, Leader, notwithstanding the brilliant work that David is doing in his portfolio in terms of public protection, it does absolutely seem clear to me, we hear people, don't we, talking about where Gedling lags behind, and clearly we are lagging behind in the funding attracted from government. We remain the 7th worst affected council in the country in terms of the amount of funding we receive. And even then, we're managing to keep the show on the road and all of these achievements that have come. But one of the issues that's been raised in recent weeks with us is pockets in the borough where people are feeling maybe concerned about going out at night when it's dark, where the street lighting is not adequate, where people don't feel safe. And it would be tin-eared of us to sit here and ignore that issue. The Borough Council obviously does tremendous work with the local police. The local police do tremendous work. But I think there is a serious question to ask of our local police and crime commissioner why tons and tons of funding have been put into areas like Newark and Ashfield from the Safer Streets funding, part of which was announced after the awful situation with Sarah Everard, where the Prime Minister said he expected improvements in street lighting and community safety. And yet again, Gedling has not seen a fair share of that Safer Streets funding. I know the Police and Crime Commissioner this week has just launched her own crime plan, but residents who are contacting me, particularly in and around the Killissit area, but in other areas around Arnold and across the borough, are asking quite rightly the question about why they aren't receiving their fair share of this money to improve street lighting, to improve street safety in terms of people just going out to walk the dog in the evening, maybe just going down to the local supermarket from their estate where they've got to cut through a dark Twitchell or a Ginnell or through a park that's not particularly well lit. This Borough Council is investing in CCTV. This Borough Council is investing in neighbourhood wardens and working with police. And at the meantime, we've got a Safer Streets funding that's being discharged everywhere else in the county, and Gedling is being left out. So I'm certainly committed as a local county councillor. I know Councillor Henry Wheeler is. I know that David continues to push these issues on the police and crime panel. That it's about time that we got our fair share of funding to make sure that we can do what we can to support our residents here in Gedling, because at the end of the day, they pay just their fair share of tax as well, and they want to see some funding coming back down in return.
Thanks, Michael. Well said. Are there any further comments? No further comments? Mike? Nothing else?
Leader, thank you.
Not from you. Okay, we're asked the recommendations on page 15. I'll move the recommendation. Seconded. Agreed. Thank you. Moving on, I think we're on to item 6, draft waste and recycling. This could be interesting. It's finally arrived. Finally arrived. A lot of work gone into it, so I'll let the Chief Exec introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Just to start off this report, I think it's very important that we certainly have one, and this report, as the Leader said, is it took a long time in being developed, but we're quite happy with what is presented today, and obviously it's up to Cabinet to decide whether you want to approve it today or not. But just to talk around it, so to set it out from the start, so Gedling Borough Council has not previously set out and formally adopted a waste and recycling policy. However, it is important that we do have one because we need to progress the ambitions of the Council as set out in our Gedling plan. We need to adopt a consistent approach for all our residents, and we need to improve recycling rates in accordance with our carbon management strategy. Just for a bit of clarity, Gedling Borough Council is defined as a waste collection authority, and Nottinghamshire County Council are what's called the Waste Disposal Authority. In practice, what this means is that Gedling collects the waste from residents, and the County Council instructs us on the locations as to where to drop off that rubbish for treatment or disposal. We have no choice in that matter. The County Council also defines what we can and cannot accept in the recycling bin, and they control this through a long-term contract with Veolia. At the moment, that contract does not accept all types of recyclable waste, which I believe then causes some confusion for our residents, resulting, again, sometimes some possible contamination in the recycling bins, which then has a knock-on impact on the borough's recycling rates. It's therefore important that this policy clearly sets out Gedling Borough Council's position in terms of waste and recycling, working alongside those contracts and things set out as part of the County Council's protocols for collection of waste. The policy here presented today is comprehensive and covers all elements of our waste collection service. However, I'd just like to highlight the headline proposals, and these are as follows. So, residual waste bin sizes are to be based on the size of the household. This means that with all properties occupied by between 1 and 5 residents, all those households will be allocated a bin based on a size of 240 litres. And larger families will also be offered a greater capacity if required and on request. Recycling bins and glass boxes are also provided to all households. Probably what is not known out there to the public, and I wish to stress this today, recycling and glass boxes is very important to us as a council, and we do offer additional capacity for these, and they're offered free of charge on request by a resident, again, to promote the recycling that we aim to do as part of this council. Ongoing education through social media and other channels will promote the recycling message on a continuous basis, and again, we hope to avoid the contamination of bins. In very exceptional cases, Leader, the ability to use enforcement as a means of changing behaviour. And on this latter point, I would just like to clarify something there. So what we mean by enforcement is it's in exceptional circumstances, and it would not apply to a resident that makes an honest mistake and puts something in the wrong bin. Instead, it will only be used for continued and deliberate behaviour that causes contamination. And just to complete the picture there, Leader, what happens if a recycling bin is contaminated? It goes into the back of a refuse collection vehicle and it contaminates the whole load, the entire load. And what that means is we cannot recycle anything that's contained in the back of that vehicle, and instead we have to redirect it to the incinerator, which is a real shame for residents' great efforts in recycling. So just to finish then, Leader, on this, if approved today, this policy, we will be subject to a 4-week consultation, which we hope will be suitably responded to in a positive vein by the public out there. So I'll leave it there, Leader, and happy to respond to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mike. It is important, very important, particularly with climate change, etc., that we've got to really get on board with this. Speaking again to the climate change officer yesterday, and she had taken, not physically, but she had gone with a crew up to one of the schools yesterday, and the kids were all over this lorry, and she's explaining the cycle of, from when you buy it in the supermarket, in effect, or you buy it off the market stall, what happens to all that waste? Where does it go? Some people throw it away, some people deal with it properly. We've got to all join together on this, and this is one way. So it is a nudge, there's no doubt in that, because there are some people deliberately contaminating the bins, particularly nappies and things like that, which can take up to God knows how many 100 years to dispose of if it finishes in a landfill. So I think it's a correct way forward. We're just saying, look at it and take part, because it's all part of affecting the climate, and make sure you do it, because if you put the wrong things in the bins and they get buried in the ground, eventually it ends up in the water table, and it comes in the water table, and you switch the tap on, and eventually it'll come through to you, or to future generations in this case, because there are many sites in this borough now that have been contaminated from the past that we have to keep a close eye on. But just before I open it up, I'd just like to record, I think the whole Cabinet, the whole Council record our thanks to Peter and his department, to Mel and department down there, because our people down there have gone out for 2 years now solidly, when everybody else has been not all over the place, but a lot of people have been stationed at home. They've gone out, they've picked up the bins, they've done it in clement weather, a lot of people being ill. I think we've managed virtually to keep the entire system running. I think that's a credit with such a small staff, so I think we need to pass our thanks to them. They're an absolute jewel, similar to the MTO officers that Jenny mentioned. She's gone way beyond where we asked her to go in putting these homes. Not only is it good for the people by getting the homes back, but it's also bringing, people the fact that they've got a roof over their head, and they've been sorted. I don't know whether we won't raise that one of yours, Jenny, that's been there for years in your patch that was about, was it 30 years or something like that?
I've just raised it again.
Yeah, there's one or two sticking that some people seem to buy a property, leave it, and causes havoc to people. But anyway, back to this. Thanks to all those people, and looking forward for some comments. I think Peter was first.
I take what Mike said, and I agree entirely. Have we ever thought about... I know we take the schools to the recycling centre at Mansfield to show them. Have we ever tried the local public? Because some of the public don't, like you say, don't really understand what pressure we're under to make sure everything goes in the right bin. It might be worth a try to see if we can get some of the community centres, some of the old folks organisations, to see if we could get a trip with some of those organisations, because them are the people who make sure they put the right thing in the bin. But they talk to a lot of people, and if we can get the people on board in making sure they're putting the right thing in the bin, that will help, because there is a need for that. I mean, I went up to the tip. Well, I've been up 3 times this week, and the staff up there are absolutely first class. They really help you to which bin you put it in, and they're very, very supportive. So I think if we can get more people to know it's there and use it more, show them what we have to do, would not be a bad thing for the community, because people just think, stick it in the bin, it's gone. And if they realise what pressure we're under to make sure it goes in the right bin and at the right time, then that not do us any harm, I don't think. But I agree with John. I think the staff down at the depot have done extremely well over the last couple of years. We've lost 1 or 2 senior staff through various things. One bloke's been off 18 months, falling down the steps, really in a bad state. And we've got another one who's just had a bloody heart attack, senior staff. So it's been very difficult down there. So in all fairness, I think they've done extremely well under the circumstances, with the conditions and the fact they've lost 1 or 2 staff through illnesses and other people who have left the department. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I think I'll add in there the education that I said about the climate change officer. I think we might be loading that on Viv and Catherine to look at, because it's those younger people coming through. To try and say they've got it, it's absolutely get it there, that this is not good to do.
No, I think we should use social media as much as possible as well, in terms of filming down there, actually.
I'll get one. And we have a Thursday afternoon where we just have a cup of tea, play a game, and I could organise a trip to take them to the recycling centre, just show them what we actually do, and I'll do that.
Michael's next.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. And I just want to start by echoing your thanks to our refuse collection team and the wider team who are responsible for this service. I think the very fact that our most recent survey said that 82% of our residents were satisfied or very satisfied with the service shows just how important the universal service of refuse collection is. And it's there where I want to start, really, Leader, because given that it is such an important service, it's not really something that we as councillors ought to be misleading the public about. And it's to that end that I'm bitterly disappointed that a fantastic piece of work has been done here by officers that's been discussed by our Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that's now finally found its way to Cabinet. It's the first time, as the Chief Executive said, that this council has ever had clearly set out in black and white a waste and refuse policy and strategy that talks about how we increase recycling, how we reduce contamination, how we communicate better with residents, and how we work with our teams to make sure we're doing everything we can to improve the service. But we've just had a recent by-election in Gedling Borough Council, and there are 2 things that I think were bitterly disappointing in that by-election, and that I was communicated with by residents who lived in that area. The first is this. I expect far better from our local Member of Parliament than on the 6th of January taking to Twitter, stood on a street in our borough, saying that, and I quote, people shouldn't vote for the bin-reducing Labour Council. And I'll come to that accusation in a moment. That couldn't have been further from the truth. And as I said earlier, we shouldn't be misleading residents about a service that is such of importance, and we should expect better from our Member of Parliament. What also happened in that by-election, Leader, was that there were a series of leaflets put not just through a few doors, but every single door in household, a few thousand households in the Cavendish ward, that said, help me save your bins, from the Conservative candidates, and accused Gedling Borough Council of systematically shrinking bins down to 180 litres. Well, you've got it here today on the public record, members of the public, not only those who live in Cavendish, but all of you who live in Gedling Borough, that this council, this Labour-run council, is not only maintaining a decent bin collection service, it is making sure that you have a 240 litre black bin, that you have a 240 litre green bin in terms of your recycling, that if you want additional recycling bins, you can ask for them if you are recycling, and if you want additional glass boxes, you can ask for them and recycling. There's nothing shrinking about that. There's nothing downsizing about that. It's about maintaining a decent service. And if the MP has any decency about him, Mr Randall, you will retract the downright misleading comment you made on the 6th of January on Twitter. And if the Conservative councillors who serve on this council have any decency about them, they will also retract the accusations they made that frightened and scaremongered many residents who lived in Cavendish Ward. And I'd just conclude by saying this. If it was such an important issue for the Conservative councillors to deliberate about this important policy, why didn't they bother to partake in the overview and scrutiny working group that was taking place on this? There were Labour councillors, there were Liberal Democrat councillors, I think there were independent councillors as well. There are 3 Conservative councillors that sit on the overview and scrutiny committee, Councillor Martin Smith, Councillor Sam Smith and Councillor Simon Murray. Not one of them took part in the overview and scrutiny working group on waste policy collection, but they went out putting leaflets through the door, scaremongering people, telling people that it was important. And when it came to the overview and scrutiny committee, which quite rightly looks over policies, Leader, and presents them forward for deliberation here at Cabinet, when it came to the committee that finally took the decision to put a policy forward to Cabinet, it was referred through, the policy was referred through. 2 of the Conservatives weren't there. Councillor Simon Murray, to be fair to him, I think was there, and it was minuted that it was referred through. So I think we've seen a lot of misleading. I think we've seen a lot of untruths. I think we've seen a lot of unhelpful things said that don't do any service to the residents who live in this borough, that don't do any service to the hard-working men and women who work for our refuse collection team, that frighten residents unnecessarily, when in actual fact what you see here is a really, really strong policy that gives a 240-litre black bin, a 240-litre green bin, protects the garden waste scheme and the glass collection scheme, allows additional recycling bins if you want them and additional glass collection bins if you want them, and tries to bring down those contamination levels. But let me just conclude by saying this. It isn't a problem with our residents in this borough who don't understand what they need to put in their bins. The problem that lies at the heart of this is a diabolical contract by the Disposal Authority, Nottinghamshire County Council, with Veolia that is not broad enough, does not allow people to recycle enough items, which is ludicrous in a country that calls itself the 6th richest country and one of the most advanced countries in the world. And we've just seen a recent review by that contract that took months an officer's time. And what was the one conclusion that came out of it? You can now recycle bottle tops. I mean, it's pathetic. And really, if we're going to tackle and break the back of this issue around contamination in bins, then the County Council needs to quickly get to grips with this contract and do something about it. Because I certainly, for one person who has to recycle things in this borough, am left confused about precisely what you can recycle, what you can't recycle, why you can't recycle plastic food trays. And it can't be beyond the wit of the smart people that we've got working both within the County Council, within Veolia, and here within the Borough Council to sort these issues out so that residents are clear on what they can recycle and that we can do what everybody wants, which is rapidly increasing recycling rates so that we can do everything we can to protect this planet. But I certainly, for one, am looking forward from a retraction and an apology from the Member of Parliament and our Conservative councillors, because I think what they did over frightening people over bins and refuse collection was downright scurrilous and utterly unacceptable and below what you would expect from people elected in public office.
Thank you, Michael.
A few weeks ago that he bought something in Sainsbury's, I think it was Sainsbury's, I think there was some fruit or something, and one part of the product, the packaging could be recycled, and the next part on the top couldn't be recycled. So when people come to recycle it, everything went in. But they've got one part you could recycle and one part you couldn't. I mean, the government ought to be putting some pressure on the manufacturers to make sure we either don't use that sort of thing, or we just tell people what the problem is.
Well, I think that's what Michael's saying about the county should get to grips with it.
That's the whole problem with that contract. I mean, we did bring it up in the devolution discussions the other day, and all councils are asking similar questions, because I raised it there, Mike raised it, Chief Executive there raised it, and they have agreed to now start looking at it, because it's just so confusing. David.
Thank you, Leader. And I think very clearly waste and recycling is a significant issue. I think item later on the agenda shows that most people, or many people, see it as the most important service that we provide. And we know how important recycling is, and we've heard how especially young people are keen on recycling. So I think it's right that it's taken some time to codify and develop this policy, and I'd like to thank the officers for carrying this forward. I know it's been bounced between one or two of them, so I think it's good that it's been brought forward. I'd also like to commend Overview and Scrutiny for the work they did. And the sensible set of aims that they produced, which is set out in paragraph 1.9, which shows the right balance on this policy. And as Councillor Payne noted, I noted that there were representatives from all three groups, the Labour, the Lib Democrats and the Independent group on that working group, but not the main opposition group. Obviously didn't feel that they'd want to put the hard yards in to deliver something, or perhaps they didn't have a briefing from Conservative Central Office. Clearly, the main priority is to improve recycling and reduce contamination. And I'm personally convinced that most people want to do the right thing. But as Councillor Payne said, it's the confusing rules which work against this. So I think the emphasis on education and communication is right, and that's where we ought to start with as the policy. But at the same time, we have the Section 46 powers in reserve for particularly recalcitrant individuals, or as the Chief Executive said, in exceptional circumstances. But I think one thing that ought to be reinforced is that the Council, as you would expect, would use these powers in a proportionate way and in compliance with the principles of good regulation. And if we try to deviate from that, I'm sure Fran would pull us back very quickly. I am concerned, though, about the County Council's consultation on the Household Waste Recycling Centre. I think any proposal to close Calverton would just exacerbate all of this and set us back. So I think that's something we need to keep a close eye on. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Henry.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to echo your points around the immense hard work that the refuse collection team have done over the last 2 years particularly. I just wanted to comment on the often hidden things that refuse collectors do, particularly around safeguarding. They're often actually the ears and eyes on the ground, and I'd just like to thank them for all the hard work that they've done, particularly during the period of lockdowns, where they may have picked up on people that are very isolated, lonely, or they may have picked up on quite a few issues around safeguarding, some of those really key issues in the local community that often don't get picked up, will get picked up by our refuse collection team. And I just want to thank them for all the hard work they've done during that period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Jenny.
Thank you. Yeah, Michael covered quite a lot of what I was going to say, certainly about misinformation going out and providing clarity. And I agree with him. I think it's so confusing. The very short list of what we can put in, because it says yoghurt pots. Well, what about cream pots and what about other pots? And it always concerns me that not only might we be putting the wrong thing into the recycling, but we're actually throwing away things that we could actually recycle. And I think it's such a narrow band that we've got at Veolia at the moment. This document, I think is absolutely splendid, and thank you to everybody who worked so hard on it. Because I think just going out for consultation can be a very useful educational tool. We put this document out, and hopefully we're going to advertise it widely, and people can read it during the consultation and actually learn a lot from it. I don't think that a lot of people know that they can put an amount of batteries out on the top of their bin for collection. I don't think many people know that they can put small electrical items on the top of the bin. So just getting that information out as part of this process will be great. I also hope that individual councillors will make sure that their local groups get sight of this and are able to contribute, because in that way we'll get the information out. I think it's a really splendid job, and thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Thanks, Jenny. And Michael's just reminded me that just to put the record straight over the closing of the one at Carlton, or rather Gedling, and that was the old pit site for those who are listening to this. It was a Conservative County Council that closed that. And crucially, we don't want that for Calverton. You know, I mean, I don't know whether the next stop, I was jesting yesterday saying it might be Doncaster we'll be going to or something like that. But Neil Clark, no relation to mine, Neil Clark, Conservative, said in County Council last week he couldn't promise that that would be kept open. So we need to keep the pressure up. We need to remind people and get people to write to the County Council, particularly Neil Clark, who's the portfolio holder, Viv, do you want to come in?
Yeah, only to say thank you, Leader. Just to pick up on the point, I think, Jenny, you just said that. I absolutely 100% do agree that people want to do the right thing. Nobody's out to not do the right thing. I think it is confusing. I think it's a poor contract. I think the county need to get to grips with that in terms of, you know, the types of materials that are coming through our supermarkets and our stores. But I think it is about trying to educate and help because, like you say, we all struggle at the bin to know which bit to put in and what not to put in. We all want to do our best, and I absolutely believe Gedling residents want to do their best. But we just get confused.
We get confused, get frustrated, and I think anybody that sees the new Sainsbury's site, I'm not quite sure whether, I've not been down recently, but in Collick to see whether the bins have gone in there. They did say to us they were putting recycling bins there, but if it's anything like the one across the road in Arnold, you know, that's like mountains and mountains of all sorts of stuff in there that they throw onto it. And it's very difficult. There needs to be legislation nationally and there needs to be rules as to, you know, the people who manufacture this stuff, people who sell it, and the people then, because it ultimately becomes your responsibility when I buy that bottle there, what do I do? How do I dispose of it? What do I do? Well, it's got to be made simpler and then people will take part, because if you don't, they'll just throw it. You know, it's very frustrating, but did you just want to come back, Peter?
The class thing, when you come to the box we've all got, if you don't put it out every week and it gets heavier, the lads who've got to pick them boxes up, they're bloody heavy, especially if you've got 3 weeks glass going in them. And I think we've got to start, I've mentioned this to Mel in the past, we've got to start and look at that, whether we need to put some on wheels or something like that, or have a different kind of bin. But having said that, we've said that, but then we don't know what's going to happen to the waste system. So, but that's all in the motorboat. Because I think if somebody had to pick them bins up sometimes, they can finish it with a bloody bad back quite easily. Because they are heavy when you've got 3 or 4 dozen bottles of empty glass bottles in your bin. They're quite heavy. So it's something I've spoke to Mel about and we're looking at it, but it could be a very, very urgent problem.
Yeah, and well, there's simple things that you can do that the co-op's a big leader, and I don't know if you've been in your local co-op recently, but they've got the soft plastics now. You can go in there, you fold, you know, when you get lots of bags and all sorts of things like that, you can take those in, or things that hold bread wrappers, crisp wrappers, and they recycle them. Well, if they can do it, why can't they bring legislation in to make sure that we can get some funding to do it? Right, I think we better move on now then. To Chief Executive, any comments on that?
Thank you, Leader. Just to answer Councillor Barnes' initial question about the visiting the recycling centre, Veolia, to be fair to them, are normally very helpful and will take groups, so we can see what we can do if, you know, give us a list of people who would like to go and we'll see what we can do. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for the comments. I move recommendation on page 43. Can I second it, please? Second, we agreed? We are agreed. Thank you. Moving over now to item 7. Where are we? That's the budget monitoring. And it's Paul. He's the only righteous person in this chamber because he's got the sun shining on him. Go for it, Paul.
Familiar with the format of the report from previous. This provides us with the latest revenue and capital projections for the current year as at the end of December 2021. As set out on page 88, our net revenue budget for the current year, 21-22, is £11.6 million. And at previous meetings, we projected overspends of 22,700 and 58,800 at the ends of quarters 1 and quarter 2 that we met from both the leisure strategy and efficiency and innovation reserves. However, at quarter 3, we're in a much more encouraging position now. We're able to project an underspend of £56,500, which will allow almost all of the overspend at the end of quarter 2 to be returned to the efficiency and innovation reserve. The main factors behind the improved position are set out in the report. Probably the most significant one is additional income from leisure centres as the restrictions have been lifted and people have been able to actually get back to using our centres. Also as well, we've had, while the centres were closed, we had savings on vacant posts as well. These together have had a significant benefit for us. It was difficult at the end of quarter 3 with all the uncertainty with the pandemic to kind of really get a firm grasp of that. But now at the end of quarter 2, but now at the end of quarter 3, getting a much clearer idea now. Numbers are coming back to the centres as set out in the report, particularly in swimming, which is kind of really, really encouraging. There are some areas, as you can imagine, the pandemic still has to have an effect on the council, and we're still experiencing some difficulties as a result of that with some of our budgets, particularly on the income ones, licensing income, trade waste and bin sales for new developments, for example. But we've set out in the report itself a table where we've tried to, where we can, think we can attribute reductions in income to the pandemic. But sometimes there are different factors going on there. But we've tried to do that and set that out for the benefit of members in the report. So when we did the report, the Omicron variant, members will recall, was probably at its peak. So hopefully when we come to the end of quarter 4, we'll be in an even better position then, all being well. Members may recall as well, when the pandemic first started, the government brought in an income compensation scheme that compensates local authorities for the loss of income from sales, fees and charges to the extent of 75 pence in every pound. But that only relates in this current year to the April to June period. That stopped as at 30th of June. But it did allow us to receive government compensation of just over £200,000, which we've now received. In terms of the collection fund, this is a separate fund whereby we collect income from council tax and business rates. We're not reporting any change in this report to that what we reported to members as at the end of quarter 2. What we are doing this month is doing our projections for the surplus or deficit on our collection fund account for both council tax and business rates. And those will feed into the 2022-23 budget report that will be coming here to Cabinet on the 17th of February. In terms of the efficiency programme that members approved at the start of the year, we had a revised programme of 875,000 for current year 21-22 as set out in the report. We're proposing to defer some of those, just over 130,000, into the following year, into the 22-23, mainly to kind of allow more time to prepare for the steps that need to be taken before those can be implemented as intended. In terms of our capital programme, as we're now entering the final quarter of the year, we're proposing that those schemes that we know won't commence by the 31st of March to be moved forward into the new year. That's the primary change to the capital programme proposed in the report. But it still leaves us with a programme for the current year of 9.5 million, which is financing primarily by borrowing and through external grants and contributions. There are 3 appendices to the report. Appendix 1 is a summary, as we've just outlined, and then detailed variances across individual portfolio holders. And you'll see there a number of areas whereby we're moving items to or from reserves to try and address the most significant variances as they've occurred. Appendix 2 shows how we've utilised our earmark reserve in quarter 3. And Appendix 3 shows the detailed capital programme. All the schemes in the current year's capital programme are set out in Appendix 3. Also with a summary at the end of how it's grouped together of how we are intending to finance those schemes. As I say, it's primarily this year through a combination of borrowing and external grants and contributions that we anticipate receiving. I'll pause there, but if anyone has any questions would like to ask me, I'll be more than happy to address them.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks to everyone that's involved in trying to make sense of all these figures and keep us on the straight and narrow. Michael is a financial portfolio.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and a particular thanks to Paul for comprehensively walking us through the report and for the work that both you and Alison and the wider team have been doing to pull together this quarter 3 report. Just 2 things I think I'd emphasise and stress from what Paul said and which are borne out in the report. Incredibly pleasing, I think, for a whole variety of reasons. One, because it assists the council in terms of maintaining frontline services, but I think more importantly because it says something about the interests of people in being healthy and taking part in exercise and getting out there and, you know, resuming perhaps some of the activities they weren't able to do throughout the pandemic. Really pleased to see the net increase in leisure centre income as a result of the number of swim school memberships, which has highlighted totaling £189,000. That is clearly not an insignificant figure, but as I say, fantastic to see that re-engagement in that particular activity that maybe we're not seeing, as Paul said, more broadly in some of the other leisure activities and some of the other services that haven't resumed to pre-pandemic levels. On the flip side of the coin, the second point I just wanted to draw attention to is we've clearly, as it says here in the report, seen reductions in our licensing income with our taxi driving applications and renewals not being back to pre-pandemic levels, £54,000, reducing our trade waste income of £29,000 odd, which I guess in some part can be attributed to the impact of the pandemic. Again, reductions in bin sales in terms of new developments, and there'll have been an impact in the pandemic there in terms of slowing down of house building, certainly at the worst point in the COVID pandemic, and also impacts on any parking revenue, albeit we're a borough that enjoys 2 hours free parking as a result of a commitment over the last 11 years by this Labour administration. That all gives a cumulative impact on the budget at the end of Q3 of £383,000, £383,400. And I just think that brings into stark relief for us the issue about the rhetoric and promises made by national government about compensating for extra expenditure throughout the pandemic and income lost, and that not actually being matched in reality in the money that we've received for them. Of course, money that we've received from the government to, in part, compensate for additional expenditure and loss of income throughout the pandemic is welcome. I'm not going to be churlish about it. But the total budget pressure, as at Q3 for 2021-22, is somewhere in the order of 1.1 million, just over 1.1 million. And we've only received a total of grants in terms of government grant funding, income compensation, job retention funding, furlough as it was more colloquially known, of 786,000. It leaves us essentially a shortfall, a pressure, a gap, just in terms of the COVID impact of £383,000, £383,400 to be specific. Which is actually not too dissimilar from the actual impact in last year's budget of about £384,000 gap between the loss in income, the additional expenditure we had to give throughout the pandemic, and the money we actually received from the government. So not only is there a gap, Leader, in terms of the money that we've actually spent and the money we've lost as a council throughout the pandemic, but there's also then the double whammy of the fact that we've had not particularly an outstanding settlement, as I said earlier, and remain the 7th worst affected council in the country. And I just think people will be left asking the question that I'm asking myself, which is, why have we seen a 13% reduction in our core spending power since 2015-16, but Stratford-on-Avon, which is a district council, not dissimilar to ours in terms of its size and its makeup and its population, has seen a 20+% increase in their core spending power? And I just think if you're a resident here and you're a taxpayer like I am, you're left asking the question, how is that fair? I'm paying my income tax, I'm paying my national insurance, I'm paying my council tax, I'm paying all the other contributions, as are other hard-working residents in Gedling. How can it be right that there's a system where we're being left to lag behind in terms of the government's formula, while other places, and I'm not picking on Stratford-on-Avon, you can pick a number of other places around the country, are just running away with increases in core spending power, which essentially is pounds and pennies to run services. And there's just a huge unfairness, I think, in all of that. And I just wonder when it's going to get resolved, John, because you and I have been banging our heads against a brick wall for 3 years now with government ministers, with local members of parliament, with civil servants, pressing the case. The case has been acknowledged. Civil servants acknowledge that Gedling is one of the worst affected councils in the country and that our communities are suffering, but they stop short of doing anything about it. And I just wonder at what point they are actually going to do something about it, because it's our residents, it's our businesses, it's the people who work for the council who actually have to run these important services who are suffering as a result. But thank you, Paul, for walking us through the report comprehensively, and thanks for the work that you and Alison and others have done, working so hard in what has been a difficult area over the last 2 years.
Thanks, Michael. I think you pinpointed it there. We have tried now, certainly for the last 3 years, of trying to get somebody from what I call the big house government to actually recognise it. They recognise that there's a problem here. They recognise that our figures are right and correct that we're presenting to them, and the unfairness of it, and then they go away and do nothing. I think, I'd appeal, if people are listening to this, and appeal broadly to the people that live in Gedling, start lobbying your local MP, start lobbying the government, and say this cannot be fair. It cannot continue, because it's just eventually it will affect seriously the quality of service that we can provide and the quality of people's lives. So we need to do that and try and highlight that wherever we can. Is there any, sorry.
Little sort of a, sorry, produce a little sort of a map telling us what we've not got, so as we can do it as individuals to our MP and our parliamentary colleagues and say, so as we can write the figures down, because you talk to the general, if you tell the general, oh, we've lost that because so-and-so, but if they don't know what we've lost and how we've lost and who's got what, then they can't do much about it. We ought to make sure it's available, so people who want to write to the central government, to write a complaint or write to the post, have got some information to do just that.
And they could also test the figures. I'm sure we can come up with something that abbreviates it, and I see Paul nodding over there, that it's really in layperson's language, because we're not all whiz kids on this, are we? But it's as interesting. I was looking the other day, you know, the bank, what was it? Did the bank rate go up? Something, the interest rate went up. None of the banks, as far as I know, have passed it on to anybody. It doesn't look like it in the account I've got. And so times that by millions of people, no wonder they're making these excessive profits. It should be ploughed back into something like this. Right, if there's no further comments, which I don't see any further comments, then I'll move that recommendation. There are 3 there. Approve the general fund budget requirements set out in Appendix 1. Number 2 is to note the use of reserves and funds during Q3 as detailed in Appendix 2, and to approve the changes in the capital programme included in paragraph 2.4. I move. Seconder?
Yes, seconded, Leader. And sorry, it was remiss of me to say what an absolute achievement of all the staff to land in an underspend position, albeit of around £50,000, as Paul said, out of a net budget of, you know, just above 11 million odd pounds. I think is a phenomenal achievement given the pressure on all of the budgets at the moment. So well done, Paul. Well done, Alison, for the tight control over this. But well done to every single member of staff in the council for getting us to that position. It's I think I've said before, it's a bit like landing a parachute on a pinhead on a beach. It's not an easy job, and you've done a phenomenal job, and we're obviously getting close to year end, so to be in that position is not a bad position to be in, so well done.
Have you noticed neither of them wear spectacles? With all those figures and all that screen work. But anyway, it's moved, seconded, and we are agreed. We are agreed. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It's me again. Yeah, members will be familiar with the format of this report, and I always say when I introduce this, don't be alarmed or perturbed by some of the jargon, the term Treasury Management. It simply refers to the Council's investments and borrowings. Investments are any surplus funds that we have, and any borrowing that we incur in support of our capital programme. As you can imagine, Treasury Management, because we're dealing with public money, it's a highly regulated area, and we have to comply with various government legislation and codes of practice as well, set by our governing body, CIPFA. 2 of the most noticeable ones of those are the Prudential Code and the Treasury Management Code. And they've both been subject to significant scrutiny and consultations in recent years. And new versions of those came out in December and have now been formally implemented. A lot of this was kind of in reaction to a number of authorities that kind of borrowed money from central government and speculated in commercial property investments, such like around different parts of the country. And just to make sure, and these rules were kind of brought in just to make sure that, whilst that wasn't specifically outlawed, it's to make sure that any borrowing that local authorities undertook was properly assessed and considered to be affordable before authorities entered into it. So the environment in which we undertake Treasury Management has changed, the rules in which we operate, but in terms of day-to-day business here at Gedling, the new codes don't really have any effect on us currently at all. You'll see reference to those in 2.9 in the report. As I was saying, any borrowing that we have to do has to be prudent, affordable, sustainable, and those limits in terms of our borrowing are set by members at Council in March at the beginning of each new financial year. They're what we call prudential indicators, and we'll come on to those in a minute. They kind of govern how we have to operate. Alison, as a Section 151 officer, has to make sure that the Council complies with those. Also as well, in terms of our investments, where we can invest our money, that's all set by members of the Council. Again, meeting in March each year, the investment strategy comes to Cabinet first, and then we'll get approved by Council in March. And again, they govern us as officers. They set the parameters in which we have to operate. Just on a more kind of wider scale, the Leader just pointed out, back in 16th of December, the Monetary Policy Committee increased the base rate from 0.1% to 0.25%. but it's still at historically low levels, the sorts of levels as a country we've not experienced in the last 300 years or so. Just in terms to now to kind of Gedling and where we are, what's happened in the last quarter, again, the limits that the members set for where we can invest our money, been no change to those at all, not needed to do anything there. And we continue to, most of our investments, we invest those in short-term money market funds. Those are AAA rated, highly diversified funds, and we can get our money back there. We can just ring up in the morning and the money will be back with us that day. So again, it's highly liquid. And so in terms of most of our investments, very, very short term. We didn't do any new borrowing in the last quarter. We did borrow some money earlier this year, £1 million to help finance our capital programme. We envisaged that we might need to do some borrowing sometime later on this year, but so far our cash balances have held up and meant that we've not had to go out and do that additional borrowing, which has made a slight saving for us, also referred to in the previous report, on our external borrowing costs for the current year. Appendix 1, so there are two appendices to this report. Appendix 1 shows our Treasury activity that we did in the last quarter. And again, this just demonstrates the point. No loans were made or repaid in the last quarter, and our investments increased at 31st of December. They were 36.9 million. They will go down in the final quarter of the year because, of course, you'll be aware that the likes of council tax income and other income, the profile tails away as we go into the final quarter. So that will come down as we approach the 31st of March. But it's all well in line with our expectations. Appendix 2 was referred to earlier. We have to report this. This is the prudential indicators that we need to report to members. We have to track progress against these. Again, this is to make sure that our borrowing, as we say, is properly sustainable, that we're not taking on unnecessary risk. And again, we can report that the indicators set by members at the start of the year, Alison, again, she's the 151 officer, we can report that we've complied with those prudential indicators in full in quarter 3. That's all I've got to say on the report, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions anyone has. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, I mean, the things that were interesting in this report for me were the point that was made about inflationary pressures, which is real impact on households that we represent in Gedling, and clearly now CPI inflation being at whatever it is now, well, north of 5%, is causing huge pressure in terms of cost when you're filling up the tank in the car, cost when you buy in the weekly shop, and cost when you're paying your energy bills. And it's interesting that this report pulls out that 60% of the increase in inflation in advanced Western economies, for which you can include the UK, is around gas and electricity inflation, which I think, as you said earlier, Leader, just underscores why it was so important last night in Council that we tried to take some action to take pressure off households in terms of the cost of household energy, and disappointing that our colleagues in the Conservative group on the Council didn't support us on that. The other thing that really worries me, and we heard a bit of bluff from the Prime Minister earlier this week about growth in the economy, without which we're not going to get anywhere as a country. I think we heard in Prime Minister's questions that United Kingdom is the fastest growing economy in the G7, which is a complete, G7 being the 7 richest countries in the world, which is a complete misleading of the facts. The UK has suffered from the biggest slump in growth, GDP, throughout the pandemic. We are well below the G7 in terms of productivity rates in the economy. And our GDP growth, which is borne out by this report at present, I think lays somewhere around about 1.3, 1.1%, which is well below our comparators, like the United States, like France, like other countries that are in that G7's 7 richest countries, most advanced economies in the world. And all of that might sound like kind of big picture economics, but for households here in Gedling Borough, there's a very real impact of that. And if the government don't do something to get to grips with growth and trying to re-inject some confidence back in the economy, then we are going to have real problems come April when the price cap lifts in terms of energy, when the national insurance hikes come in, when, as you said last night, Leader, the personal tax allowances change, council tax bills are going to drop on people's doors. There's going to be a real issue for real families, real people on the ground. And it's not good enough, I think, for the national government to just say, well, this is all about Omicron, because the report before us explains that the slowing in growth in the economy completely predates the issues around Omicron. We know tackling the pandemic has been very, very difficult, but while ever we've got a government that is distracted by the issues that we've seen over recent weeks about parties and sleaze and other things, it's taking its eye off the ball on some of these critical issues, and we can't afford as a country to take our eye off the ball on these issues, because at the end of it, as you said, John, there are going to be ordinary people, the little people who actually need the support of the national government, who are going to be really suffering, as a result of this, whether that be ending up in to go to the food banks, or whether it be coming to the council to ask for vouchers, or whether it be the council trying to step in terms of some of the hardship funds that we've got. But there's only so much a council can do to resolve these issues. It requires the intervention of a state, of a national government, to try and tackle some of these issues. So, a fascinating report, and obviously important, as Paul outlines, that we are within the limits that we set as members, which is absolutely appropriate, and I think shows the decent financial management that this council's always had, for which Paul and Alison and others should take a huge amount of credit.
Thank you. Does anyone else? Jenny?
Well, just to follow, it's not directly related, but as Michael's introduced it, I'll carry on. I think inflation is now 5.4 and predicted to go up to 6. And I agree with the misinformation that's coming out from the very top. Our Prime Minister seems to be a one-man misinformation unit just on his own. It was interesting today to read that Jack Munro, who I'm sure everybody will have heard of, a campaigner for people's incomes, has got the ONS to recognise inflation on the basics that people buy, and there is information today on the inflation on those own brand staple basics that people are buying, and they're not in single digits, they're in double digits, and that is the sort of hit that people are taking. So I don't personally expect things to get any better anytime soon, and this information that we're the fastest growing economy is just absolute nonsense and has been disproved over and over again, but it still keeps getting said. So
Thank you. Nobody else? I'll just refer people to the bottom of page 125. It's saying there that it's quite an interesting paragraph, the bottom piece, which is stating there's 160 billion of excess savings. Well, it might be all right for those who've got the 160 billion. It's what's happening to the other people. Also, on the other side of it is we've got to make sure that our Economic Development Department, our press, that we get out. There's an opportunity coming there for those in business. If it's true and there's 160 billion pounds worth of savings there, at some point somebody's going to spend it. Yeah. But it's not particularly we're looking at those. We do want to make sure the business is in the right position and ready, but it's the others that slip under that net, that go under the carpet, those who are suffering from domestic violence and all those awful things like that. It's those people there. And like the heating and eating, it's a reality now. It's not something that people just wave around. It's an actual reality. And we all have got those little pockets of people. I think I said in the council last night, it's not just the area of Netherfield that I represent, or the area of Carlton where I live, or the Kellisicks and all the rest of the places. Some of the more leafy places, and also the other people that are trapped in that net. And that is, you've bought a house 15, 20 years ago. It now wants some maintenance on it. You could enjoy and buy the house, but you can't maintain it. So, there's the pressures now. It's like a kettle boiling, that's going to suddenly explode at some point. Once again, thanks for all the information. And I'll move the recommendation, which is on page 121. Seconder? We are agreed? We're agreed. Thank you. Roy, monitoring report for April 2020, March 2021 wishes. I thought you were over there. It must be these glasses.
I did move to get out of the sunshine. Thank you. Yes, this report introduces the authority monitoring report for the previous financial year. So national planning guidance requires local authorities to publish information at least annually to show progress on 3 areas with regards to local plan preparation, to report activity relating to the duty to cooperate, and to show how the implementation of policies in the local plan is progressing. So the latest version of the authority monitoring report is attached at Appendix A. As I say, it covers the previous financial year 2020 to 2021. So key points to draw to your attention from the latest update of this report. Firstly, in relation to the local plan delivery, all policies of the core strategy in the local planning document are being implemented and monitoring. Progress has been made on the preparation of the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan, which, once it's adopted, will replace the aligned core strategy. And we're working with Nottingham City, Broxtowe and Rushcliffe to prepare that document. We undertook an initial growth options consultation in the summer of 2020 and also in spring 2021. And in tandem with that, we're preparing a joint evidence base with those authorities and with Ashfield and Erewash where appropriate. Alongside that, we're continuing to fulfil the duty to cooperate with neighbouring authorities, and Section 3 of the Authority Monitoring Report provides more detail on that. In relation to neighbourhood plans, which form part of our development plan, all policies specified in the 4 neighbourhood plans that we have at Burton Joyce, Calverton, Papplewick and Linby are being implemented. In terms of additional supplementary planning documents and guidance that we've prepared during that period, the Council published low carbon planning guidance in May 2021. So in terms of the third purpose of the Authority Monitoring Report, this is in relation to monitoring our local plan policies, and this is by far and away the bulk of the Authority Monitoring Report, which is a 70-page document. So Section 5 of the Authority Monitoring Report sets out how the monitoring indicators in the core strategy, the local planning document and the sustainability appraisal monitoring framework are being progressed. So these monitoring indicators cover a wide range of planning topics, and I'll just run through a couple of the highlights of the indicators that are monitored. So in terms of climate change, flood risk and water management, the AMR looks at the number of planning permissions for new renewable energy schemes and for waste management facilities. In relation to environmental protection, the AMR looks at proposals that have had an impact on the air quality management area within the borough. In terms of the green belt, the AMR looks at any changes to the total amount of green belt in the borough and sets out the status of each of the areas of safeguarded land within the borough. In relation to the natural environment, the AMR reports on the number of SSSIs, local wildlife sites, local nature reserves and local green spaces, local geological sites within the borough. In terms of open space, the document looks at the amount of greenfield land lost through planning applications for major development, and it also reports on financial contributions that we've received to provide new open space within the borough. In relation to historic environment, the document reports on the number of designated and non-designated assets, and particularly of note within this period, it should be noted that we've been working on non-designated heritage assets, and so the number of that has increased significantly during this monitoring period. In relation to design, the report notes the density of new development in different parts of the borough, so within the urban area and the rural settlements. In relation to homes, the report notes progress on housing allocations in the borough, and makes specific reference to the number of homes delivered on brownfield sites, the number of affordable homes delivered, the number of self-built and custom homes. As referred to earlier at this meeting, it refers to the number of empty homes brought forward. In terms of retail and community facilities, the report notes the number of vacant shop units in the different shopping centres around the borough, and also reports on any new out-of-town retail development. In terms of transport, it notes progress on transport schemes covered by the policy in our local planning document, and clearly the key proposal over the recent period has been the development of the Gedling Access Road. In terms of infrastructure and developer contributions, the report notes total contributions from both the Community Infrastructure Levy and the Section 106 contributions, and builds on information from the Infrastructure Funding Statement, which was brought separately to Cabinet. So, in conclusion, the recommendation here is to ask Cabinet to note the content of the Authority Monitoring Report covering the previous financial year, which is attached at Appendix A to this report. Thank you.
Thanks. Follow.
Yes, I mean, clearly just to thank Jo for bringing the report and thank her and Alison and everybody else involved for producing it. I mean, just got to look at the headings to look at the scale, breadth and depth of the work that is needed for this monitoring. And keeping up to date with all those, it's really quite astonishing. It's really interesting read as well, because it gives such a lot of information about homes that are being built, homes that are being planned. It was interesting, last week I picked up a Facebook post and somebody had commented about an application that had gone in, and it was pointed out by somebody else that there is a target for homes that need to be built within Gedling, and somebody had actually responded, gosh, I never knew there were targets for house building in Gedling Borough. So that was quite interesting, that people do not appreciate that we have a certain amount of houses to deliver and we have to produce a local plan which identifies the land to do it. But clearly this covers a lot more, and a tremendous amount of work, the duty to cooperate with our associated district councils. I don't know, it's all there, Chair, Leader, for you to see, so unless anybody has got any comments.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, thank you to Jo and to the wider team for putting this together. As Jenny says, incredibly informative document that contains some quite important information. It talks about, on page 159, the carbon dioxide emission estimates for industry, commercial use, domestic and transport sectors in tonnes of CO2 per capita. And it's really pleasing. I mean, we took control of the council in 2011 to see quite significant reductions in CO2 per capita, that's carbon dioxide emission estimates, in the industry sector down from 104 to 98, in the commercial sector down from 43 to 29, in the domestic sector from 244, so that's households, down to 184, and the total CO2 per capita down 4.5 to 3.6. The one I just want to highlight, and that worries me and I think requires further work, which we're not entirely responsible for, the County Council has a huge responsibility for as a Transport Authority, is that we've seen a very minor increase in on these figures that are provided from the government on CO2 per capita in terms of transport, up from 103.2 to 103.8. We know in the borough that there are areas of air quality management. We know particularly there are areas, you know, as you go along Mapley Plains down into the city, we also know there are issues in and around the ward that both Councillor Barnes represent in Daybrook and down through Red Hill that I represent. And I just think this underscores and is a salutary reminder to us of the point that Councillor McCrossan has made before, which is, it's sad really that our Transport Authority, the County Council, is lagging behind the rest of the country in terms of investing in cycling routes, walking routes, you know, public transport routes. We've got one of the best public transport systems in the country in terms of the bus service that's provided by Nottingham City transport, which is regularly awarded as being such, but the vision and ambition just doesn't seem to be there for supporting sustainable cycling routes and walking routes. And I know there are certain projects going on, and I know there are certain projects we've pushed as a borough council, but I just think there's an opportunity really being missed by the county council to be far more ambitious and visionary in this area, particularly as we've seen in very recent times, the change in the highway code now that's giving greater precedence to cycle users and pedestrians. So it's not really a point for Joe, it's a reminder to us that we need to continue to put pressure on the county council to invest in this area, because that should be a worry to us that there's been a slight increase in CO2 per capita in terms of transport. I was pleased to see reference about the progress of the local plan, and particularly the discussion in the document, Joe, around the green belt. And I just think it's worth putting on the record, because this is an issue that often gets used as a political football. And again, I talked about misleading information earlier. We've unfortunately got some councillors on this council who continue to put out information to residents saying that this council is bulldozing over the green belt. Well, this document, which is a legal document, puts scotch to that myth. On page 163, it talks about the approval of the local plan in July 2018. And let's just remind residents who might be listening to this, the local plan was approved by every single councillor in this council chamber, cross-party. It wasn't just approved by certain parties, it was approved by every single councillor. And there was only a 2% reduction in the greenbelt in that local plan for very specific reasons, where very specific criteria had to be met. And it makes quite clear here that 73% of Gedling Borough is still in the green belt. We are still a largely green area. I think you've made the point before, Leader, that about 80% of our population lives on about 20% of the land, which is largely in and around the urban areas of Arnold, Carlton, Mapley, and the surrounding towns and settlements in that particular area. So I just think we've got to put to bed this myth about Gedling Borough Council bulldozing over the greenbelt, because this document, in the point I've just raised, but in other additional points, bears out the fact that it's just not true. It goes on to say there have only been 2 planning permissions actually that have met those very specific criteria that have ran contrary to some of the policies in our local planning document. Where you might be able to argue that they've had some detrimental impact potentially on the green belt. So I just think that issue is being blown out of proportion. And if you flick over the page in the document, actually one thing I'm very proud of that this council's done is protected certain areas. Mapley Golf Course safeguarded from future development. The area around Lodge Farm Lane in Arnold protected from future development. Glebe Farm at Gedling Colliery protected from future development, and land around Spring Lane in Lamley protected, safeguarded from future development. And the document goes on, just to conclude, Leader, to talk about the really important nature reserves and wildlife sites we've got in the borough. The Gedling House Woods, the Gedling House Meadow, the Netherfield Lagoons, the Hobbucks, the Gedling Country Park, all of which have a really important, not only local nature reserve status, but good management plan with some fantastic volunteers who put in so much time to protect that amazing heritage we've got and that wildlife space. So I certainly found this a really, as Councillor Hollings was said, it's quite a lengthy document, Joe, but a really interesting read. And I think it shows that the council is taking a balanced approach to development. We're required to meet a certain target by the government in terms of our housing numbers. That's a legal requirement. You can't stick your head in the sand like an ostrich and ignore that, because you get penalised financially if you do. But the approach we've taken, I think, Joe, assisted by you and Alison and Mike Avery and the team, is a balanced, sensible approach that protects 73% of our beautiful borough that's greenbelt, that tries to use brownfield sites first where we can and derelict sites where we can, that uses strategic sites that meet the requirements we need in terms of flooding and other issues, but also protect some of those cherished wildlife sites that we've got, those beautiful sites of conservation that we've got in the borough. But I do think, Leader, we need to put some additional pressure on the county council now to just set out some real ambitious vision around improving cycle routes, walking routes, and sustainable public transport, so we can bring that CO2 emissions down and some of those air quality issues we've got around the borough down as well. But like Councillor Hollingsworth, thank you, Joe. It's a very, very interesting report, and commend you for the work you've done on it.
Peter.
Probably is working with the City Council as regards Newstead Abbey. And Newstead Abbey Park's in the borough. It's a very, very popular area. It's very busy road traffic on there. And if people come through the Papperwheel way, you've got to go right down that lane, Papperwheel lane, to get the motorway. It's quite a busy area, but I think Newstead Abbey is a gem in the county and in the borough. And I don't think a lot of people in Gedling use it as much as visitors use the Abbey, because you've got to have a car to get there. It's very difficult to go on private bus. So I just wondered if there's anything we can do to make sure that people in Gedling can visit Newstead Abbey Park better than they can at the moment, because if you've not got a car, it's very, very difficult to get from Netherville to Newstead Abbey on public transport from that point of view. And it's a fantastic park, and the environment is really worth celebrating, and it's a great thing for people to go and see and listen to and look at the bar and stuff. I just wonder if there's anything in the future we could look at that with the county and the city about, see if we could bring it into, because he's one of the top people in the world, Byron, and we've got it on our doorstep, and I don't think we make enough use of it, or even policy discussing it as much as we ought to do.
Thanks, Peter. I'd love to get hold of Newstead Abbey, but at the moment it's with the City Council, and we just haven't got the finances there. But there is a bus every 10 minutes if you go to Mansfield. The bus passes the end of the road. Yeah, but well, it's just a system of train into town and then all bus into town that way. But there is quite a frequent bus service for.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you, Lydia. I'd just like to echo what Michael has said, really. I mean, you talk about the road systems. The road systems in Woodthorpe are getting more and more chocker in terms of the roads. And really, as a modern area that we are, we should be seeing more bikes. We should be a modern. If you go to some of these modern European cities, there's bikes everywhere. In essence, the city have done quite a lot in terms of getting people on bikes, but it's. In Gedling itself, the county is not being proactive. It's lagging behind. It's quite dangerous in parts because of the speed. I mean, I'm a great believer that we should move to 20s plenty, and I've echoed that with the county council as well. In boroughs in London, a lot of the boroughs are 20s plenty. I think we should move to 20s plenty. But I do think we need to be much more proactive in how we are going to cater for. It's all very well. It's brilliant that the Highway Code has said that cyclists, have got more powers, but it's not an attractive place to get on bikes, and you can understand people feeling fearful about it. So, we do need to be lobbying the county to know what they're going to do for our borough to get more people. Apart from anything else, in terms of exercise, well-being, obesity levels are still going up. We need to do something to get people out and about and get them fit and active. So, yeah, thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Jenny?
Yeah, just to follow up from what Viv said, I actually really agree with promoting cycling. But if you look at the state of the roads at the moment, who on earth would want to take a long cycle ride across potholes, lumps where holes have been filled in and not flattened? It's like going over a tank course, I think. I hope people take notice of the Highway Code. I have noticed this morning one or two people being slightly more cautious when driving behind cyclists. But again, just through Gedling Village, we have at the moment convoys of construction traffic. Now, who would want to be cycling along convoys of construction traffic going up and down, which I hope will be resolved very soon when Gedling Access Road opens and the road is declassified. But at the moment, you're quite right, county really need to be putting some proper investment in, putting some good cycle routes in, and making it a lot easier for people to take cycles rather than their cars.
Thank you. Anyone else? Joe, do you want to pick any bits out of those? No, you're fine with that. I just thinking it's we need to comb this. Actually, if you look at your manifesto from some years ago and you look at the things that have been done, there's a lot in there. But you must be proud, Joe, and the rest of the department, because you're now seeing it's not just a strike on on a piece of paper, we'll square that off, we'll do this, that and the other, but you've put all the donkey work into getting it to where it is. And some people have moaned about big walls on Arnold Lane, weren't it, Jenny? And things like that. But with some gentle persuasion, that's made to be looking a lot better. But you know, planning is very, very key. It's not there for 5 minutes, it's there for many years. So thank you very much for that. I was interested on there was a piece in here, I can't find it at the moment, on deprivation. I think Netherfield was mentioned, Daybrook was mentioned, and Newstead. I just wondered why other areas, parts of Arnold, parts of Cavendish.
It was Cavendish.
Was it Cavendish? There's bits, you know, sort of, perhaps just have another look at that in the pockets, and how the others were measured to see why they didn't fit in there. But no, thank you very much. And we're on page 143. The recommendation is Cabinet receives and notes the content of the Authority Monitoring Report, April 2020, March 2021. I move. Seconded. Jenny seconded, and we are agreed. We're agreed, thank you. Moving along to the next one, last one rather. Oh, this is a good one. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
I've been through it that many times. Resident survey, for those listening or looking at this. This is some of the results that you gave and told us how you felt we delivered services. So go for it, Alison.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, this report presents the results of the Resident Satisfaction Survey, which was approved for completion by Cabinet at its meeting in May of last year, with the intention that the results be used to inform our service planning going forward. The survey was conducted over the summer last year and was posted to every household in the borough and was also available for completion online. We have received over 3,000 responses, which represents 6% of households, which is a very good response rate for this type of consultation. Equalities data to provide the profile of responders was collected as part of the consultation, and this will be used to help inform future consultation processes as well. In the main, the profile of responders is fairly proportionate to the borough profile, with a key exception being the age profile of responders, with the sample being skewed towards the older population. However, some analysis of responses, which are detailed at Appendix B, related to the services which are most important to people, has been completed by age category, and this indicates that what residents are telling us about what is important does not actually seem to be greatly affected by the age of respondents. There is some minor variation in the detailed order of the list, but what appears at the top, middle and bottom appears very similar regardless of age. That said, to mitigate any impact of overrepresentation of certain groups, the separate youth consultation exercise to seek the views of young people that was conducted last year will also be used in service planning. Turning now to the results, these indicate a small drop in overall satisfaction levels when the key indicators are compared to 2019 results as detailed in the table at paragraph 1.10. However, this should be considered in the context of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and on the wider public service provision since 2019, and that the services covered by the survey are not restricted to only those provided by Gedling Borough Council. It's not possible for a consultation process of this scale to obtain explanatory data to enable the reasons for reduced satisfaction levels to be identified, but this can help us inform further targeted consultation that's focused on the services provided by the Borough Council to inform the development of the future Gedling plan and the budget. The survey also asked residents to select from 16 options the top 5 services that are most and least important to them, and those most in need of improvement, with the results of that detailed in paragraphs 1.12 to 1.14. You'll see that the services selected are provided by a range of different public service providers, but for Gedling, residents tell us that the most important service is refuse collection. And as we heard earlier, this has actually got a high satisfaction level that was detailed in the survey at 82%. And our least important service is providing community and local events. In terms of the services most in need of improvement, 3 out of the 5 of those top 5 relate largely to other public service providers. For example, the top most in need of improvement being maintaining roads and pavements, which I think Jenny has just earlier alluded to. And that, of course, is a county council function. In terms of Gedling, the top services identified as being most in need of improvement include keeping the place clean and revitalising our local shopping areas. Residents were also asked to select their top 3 descriptions of the council from a list of 9 attributes, and the top 3 selected were accessible, responsive and professional, with the lowest number selecting attributes like outdated, inflexible and unapproachable, which I think that provides a very good result for the council. In summary, the data provides us with valuable information of our residents' views to help inform the development of our future plans and to secure service improvements. And it's recommended that firstly, the results detailed in the report be noted, and secondly, that the action plan as detailed in paragraph 2.2 and in the recommendations be approved to ensure that the use of the data is fully optimised. So I'll leave it there, Leader. The recommendations are set out on page 215.
Thanks, Alison. Michael, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks to Alison and thanks to all the residents who took the time to fill in the survey. I think it's a sign of a transparent council and a confident council that goes out, as we have done so regularly over the last 11 years, and ask residents honestly what they think about their local area, what they think about services. And I think, Leader, as Alison said, that we have deliberately chosen not just to ask about services that Gedling is specifically responsible, Gedling Borough Council, but that we've had the self-confidence to go out there and ask about services that we are not directly responsible for. But let me be absolutely clear that we care about. You know, we've just had a debate about roads and pavements. They're not our responsibility, they're the county council's responsibility. They're clearly in a very bad state. In the response in the survey, they're clearly the biggest issue that concerns people. They come the top of the list in terms of those areas that when people had to say what needed was in desperate need of an improvement, maintaining roads and pavements is top of the list. It's county council responsibility, but this council is concerned about it. This council will do all it can to put pressure on the county council to improve it. I think a few things that should be said, Leader. There's no getting away from the fact that there's been a slight dip, a slight drop in terms of some of the measurements. Satisfaction with the local area is slightly down. Satisfaction with the way the council runs things is slightly down. Feeling informed is slightly down. But if you put that into some context, satisfaction with the local area still runs at 85%. Satisfaction with the way the council runs things, 80%. The way residents feel informed, 90% still. Responsiveness of the council, 69%. Perceived value for money, 71%. And I don't take credit for that, John. You know, you don't as the leader, the Cabinet doesn't, but I think our staff should take heart in what are incredibly high figures, even in a period where COVID has clearly added not only a lot of pressure on our staff or the staff that work in the public sector, but particularly on the businesses and residents in the borough have been hit really, really hard. It's been a really tough period for people. And I think still to be getting those sorts of figures in a survey is really, really good. And you know, the staff who work for us, John, should be commended. We repeatedly now have heard that the area that needs the most improvement is roads and pavements. And I just really, really hope that the County Council get to grips with this, John, because when I go out and about in my ward and in my County Council patch, this is the biggest issue. It's the biggest issue in my post bag, my sort of email casework that comes in, and it will be for many councillors. And it has got to be resolved. I think residents are sick and tired of seeing this process where, you know, this fire mix material is thrown into potholes, you know, a vehicle drives over it or somebody jumps up and down on it, they clear off, and a few short weeks later it all falls, apart. And we could all point to roads and pavements in our own patches that are, you know, are repeat problems for us in terms of correspondence. The second biggest issue, tackling crime and antisocial behaviour. We do a lot in the council that isn't actually our responsibility, investing in neighbourhood wardens and other areas that we're not statutorily required to do, but we do to try and assist our hard-working colleagues in the police. But I go back to what I said earlier, John, it is about time we got our fair share of funding, and I do look forward to seeing us get a big chunk of funding from that Safer Streets funding that the Police and Crime Commissioner has got. The two things for us as a council that stand out to me are the real importance for members of the public about the bread and butter issues. Keeping the place clean and tidy really matters to people, and we must do more in that area, even with the cuts that we've had from central government. We have got a clean borough, but we know, John, there are pockets around the area where unfortunately people, you know, throw a packet down here or throw some fast food out there and then sort of blight those places, or the fly tipping, as Councillor Ellis said earlier, which causes problems. And the second area I think that is really important for us, which comes in that top 5 areas of improvement, is revitalising our local shopping areas. I'm really proud of the investment in Carlton Square that's been led by Councillor Hollingsworth and her portfolio. I'm really, really proud of the investment in Arnold Market, and I know we're pushing to see further investment in those two towns, but other shopping areas and high streets in the borough. It does just really frustrate me, John, that we are being held back by central government. We have not had a penny out of the Towns Fund, out of the Future High Streets Fund or the Levelling Up Fund, and I'm sick and tired of being told your bids aren't good enough. I just find that a really, really lame argument. Arnold is a great town. Carlton is a great town. Mapley is a great town. Some of our villages are fantastic villages that have got a lot going for them, with some beautiful shops and areas where you can go and shop locally. Our residents and businesses, I think, have done a tremendous job in COVID. And I really do think now we need the government and our local MPs to step up and give us a share of that funding, because there's a real risk that we see places like Stapleford and other places in Ashfield and Mansfield and Newark that I don't begrudge getting the money, John, but running away from our town centres and running away with money, John, that has been contributed to by our taxpayers. So, you know, I just really do implore the government, you know, in the immediate next round that comes forward from this Levelling Up Fund, to make sure that Gedling finally gets something. We're not asking for, you know, millions and millions and millions and millions, but just something out of those funds, because residents are telling us here, and they're not just telling the council, they're telling our MPs, they're telling the government, they're telling all of those of us who are responsible that their shopping centres and their town centres really matter. I was pleased to hear people describe the council as accessible, responsive and professional. I think that's a really, you know, nice thing to hear, and officers and staff should be commended for that. The one thing that plays on my mind a bit and concerns me this time round about the survey, and Alison did touch on this, the numbers of people, the percentages of people responding to the survey this time round in comparison to our previous survey in the 55 years old and over age group have gone up. So in the 55 years and 64 years, the 65 years to 74 years and the 75 year over group, the number and percentage of respondents compared to last time we asked questions of our residents have sharply gone up. In every other category, effectively from the age of 15 years old up to the 54-year-olds, there's been a drop in those categories. So we've seen less people responding this time between the age of 15 and the age of 54 in the borough. And the thing that worries me, John, is that we're getting a disproportionate response. Of course, it's hugely important we hear from people who are 55 years old and over, but the other group I just referred to, the 15-year-olds up to the 55-year-olds, are a big portion, a very large portion. I think they're almost about half of the population, if not slightly more, within the borough. And there's been a drop in the number of responses from them. And I don't think we should therefore be surprised that schools and education not seen as being overly important here, helping the borough get jobs, people in the borough get jobs, not seen as overly important in these responses. And that might be because actually we've seen a disproportionate number from people who would classify themselves now as pensioners or people who have retired, who have got other concerns, legitimate concerns, quite rightly. So I think the recommendations are right. The two things that are critical for me here, and you've said this, Leader, in the conversations we've had about this before coming to Cabinet today, the sort of you said we did. How do we now make sure that the information we've got informs the decisions we're taking in the council, and that we're investing in those service areas that matter to people? And how do we hear from, in a really sort of qualitative way rather than in a quantitative way, how do we get that quality feedback from those, particularly those areas that we haven't necessarily heard from in the same numbers this time, particularly between the 15 years old and 55-year-old age group? Because we need to just unpick some of this. What does it actually mean? What particularly is it that is concerning people in these areas? But overall, I think given the tumultuous time that everybody has had over the last 18 months, these figures are figures that we should still be very proud of, John, as a council. And I think our staff have done a a tremendous job. And thank you to every single resident who took the time to give candid, honest feedback. This is a self-confident council that wants to hear what people have got to say about us, and I don't shirk responsibility for what people have got to say. If they think we're falling short in certain areas, there's an assurance from this administration that we will listen and we will act where they think we're falling short, and that we will also listen and act to make sure that those other service areas are pulling up their boots as well and acting, like the police, like the NHS, like Nottinghamshire County Council, on the issues that matter to our residents.
Thanks, Michael. Viv?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Alison, for presenting that report. I mean, I think it's been an extremely difficult couple of years for everybody, and actually I think it's a really good thing that, you know, knowing that some, you know, people have been quite down, you know, uncertainty, anxiety, you know, people's health, lots of things that people have had to think about. So I think it was a very positive thing that Gedling went out to ask people how they were feeling, actually. And I think the response rate is very good, you know, so thank you everybody out there that responded. It's really important that we get your feedback. We want to, you know, we want to hear, and we want to improve the quality of life for our residents. So, I'm really pleased we did that. I think just to say, we've done the young people survey, Michael, which was great. We had 213 young people that responded. Now, although they weren't the same questions, some of them were the same questions. It was really about the young people survey, you know, what's their experience of living in the borough, what are the things that they worry about, etc., etc. So we will, you know, look at those, because clearly, you know, there was less about roads and highways and more around things to do, feeling safe, mental health services that really featured quite a lot for young people. So that will bring in, I think, you know, the feeling of young people, which is really important. So, you know, that's positive. I just want to make a couple of comments. I mean, I presume we have asked questions about things that are not in our power, trees and highways, etc. A big part of Woodthorpe's casework. We are going to be lobbying the county council. We are going to be showing the county council these are things in our borough that people are concerned and worried about the poor quality of our roads and trees, because that's really important. They've told us, so we need to act on that. And the other thing I'd just like to say, I mean, you know, I think we've done so much for our town centres. And Arnold, we were only commenting the other day, I mean, Ron and I, Councillor McCross, and both of us are often in Arnold, and we're seeing it. It's so much more vibrant these days. You know, there are lots of people coming into Arnold. You know, I think at one point, maybe a few years back, it would have been, you know, quite a quiet environment. It's becoming more and more vibrant. It's becoming a place that people want to shop and go to. There's lots more cafes, coffee bars. We're doing a lot of the right things, actually, to create a vibrant town centre. So I think that bit's going really well, and we've got more to come, which is brilliant. So thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thanks, Viv. It looks like more work for your group to do as well, with, you know, getting that younger age group. Jenny?
Yes, thanks, Leader. I do take Michael's point about the difference in the age groups who've responded, but just looking at what's important, there is a remarkable consistency right across the age groups. In fact, maintaining roads and pavements never drops below 4, and it's in the top 3 for most age groups. And if you look back at the previous report and you look at the demographics and the predicted increase in older persons within the borough, it is not insubstantial. So you can see why that's a really important issue, because we talk a lot about road maintenance and we forget that people use pavements just as much, and they can just be just as hazardous for older people. And I think we're all probably constantly taking up issues of uneven pavements and related issues. So I think it's pleasing to see that it's consistently high in people's appreciation of what happens, and clearly we need to monitor that little drop, and it's very unclear why there has been that drop in satisfaction at the moment. I'm not sure there's information in here that absolutely tells us that. I just wonder if that drop was caused by the fact that we did a post and online, and I think the previous time we went out and actually spoke to people on the streets. And did that give us any increase in response? And do we look at doing that again when the time is right to do it?
That's certainly worth looking at. I think the people I refer to as the keyboard warriors looked out the front door and saw that the pavements and the roads weren't up to scratch and felt, aggrieved by that, and then went back and typed it in and sent it off. I think, once we get through this and we're back out there, people's heads hopefully will lift. But what else? So I'm just looking at what else we've got. Peter.
I don't know whether we can do anything about it or whether it's on. I think it may be on the agenda somewhere. I'm talking about Front Street in particular. The bottom end of Front Street is still classed as a public highway, and only cars can go up it, or supposedly delivery vehicles and people with disability cars. I think it's becoming a bit dangerous now because Front Street, that part of Front Street, is quite busy most of the times now. And the space have got smaller and smaller with the cafes coming, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But I just wonder and worried about one of these times somebody's going to get knocked out with one of these cars coming up. Because I was up there last week before, and how somebody didn't bloody get knocked over, I don't know. But some of them are disabled drivers, but they seem to think, it's my right of way, I'm going up here, get out the bloody way. And somebody's going to get hurt. And I think we ought to be talking to the county council to make that a pedestrianised area now. I know it's classed as a highway. No cars, no buses going down like they used to when I was a kid. But it is becoming a problem. And it's getting very busy, which is fine. But I'm just worried about somebody getting hurt on that bit of Front Street. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, there are ongoing conversations with the county council because they actually own that land to try and make and see we can alleviate that. I just remind you, you owe about £35 to the mayor's box for swearing. Alison, anything? No? Okay then, page 2. Movo, sorry. Yeah, it's seconded. We are agreed. Thank you. Just nearly got us there. Where are we? Done the resident survey. We've done all the rest of the things. Quite a long meeting today. Just a reminder from myself is that I was just thinking how nice it is to sit in here. Hopefully there are no guns in here, nobody threatening us. And what day it is, Holocaust Day today, and it's just not about the Second World War, that's about all the things Rwanda, Serbia, and all the awful things that go off, have gone off in Iraq and Iran and all those places like that, where people haven't got the freedom to sit like this and try and work for their community. So, whether you're religious or not, just give it a thought and think about how those people have gone on in their lives and under the oppression. Today, I understand there are 7 survivors of Auschwitz, and the Queen has put, I think, a royal exhibition of photos. That would be nice to get something like that, because although we've got lots of things around this chamber, we don't have actually something to remind, what went off in those awful days.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I think you're absolutely right to say what you just said, and of course, really important we reflect, and it's really nice that the council, again, not only reflected last night in our full council meeting, but has got a sort of memorial display down in the reception of the council building. But I do think you're right, Leader, in what you said, and it would be, I think, helpful if the Chief Executive could take away the point about trying to find a way to have some sort of appropriate memorial somewhere in the borough for Holocaust Memorial, because there clearly are people who have got connections, deep connections back to the awful things that happened in the Holocaust. But as you said, Leader, other genocidal atrocities that have taken place tragically since. And there isn't really anywhere specifically in the borough where people can reflect, and there are other places, you rightly said, Leader, around the country where that can happen. So I think if we could take forward those discussions and maybe bring some sort of proposal forward for the budget meeting, Leader, to work up some plans next year, I think that would be very much appreciated by people in the borough.
Thank you. Any further comments? I think.
If nobody's never been to the Holocaust Centre at Ollerton, it's I know it's, when I say it's fantastic, I don't mean that in a glorified way, but it brings you down to earth and what them poor buggers in Germany suffered at the last. I mean, it's atrocious. It really is very, very upsetting, but a must for people to go and see.
Thank you. And with that, I'll thank everybody that's helped with the meeting, put the meeting together, and say we'll close it. Thank you.